What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How you feeling today, brother?
Glad to be home. It's the calm before the porch, my friend.
The calm before the porch. Well, at least your airport of choice is not the meltdown of the civilized world right now, like mine is. I have to book. I was literally going through flights, and they're like, it's like I'm flying again in like a week. And they're like, it's going to be bad for another week. I'm like, okay, so then I can't fly out of Newark. And then now I got to book flights for our next trip after that. And I'm like, do I take government people at their word that it'll be fixed in a week? Like the government told me we needed 15 days to slow the spread. And then we were in lockdowns for a year and a half. So I'm not.
It's amazing how much money there is in the airport business. And that, I guess, since government doesn't like profits, they're okay with just disrupting an entire industry. I assume the FAA positions are actually government staffed and they're not staffed by the airlines. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, those are government employees. Yeah. No, it's a government screw up. And of course, air travel is like one of the most highly regulated industries. I mean, a lot's made about how like Ronald Reagan like deregulated to some degree, I think, the airlines, but there's still like a crazy regulated, industry. And once you get to like that level of regulation, it's basically all government jobs anyway. You know what I mean? Like maybe not officially, but it's all like just the worst. The worst. Everything about the airport's so ridiculous.
I've been flying now. I take like 40 flights a year, maybe more. I take a lot of flights. I think I've only first noticed that there's actually a security fee on your flight ticket, and it's not cheap. Like if you just, I think it might be a $35 fee. That's $15 more than a porch tour ticket. And what, for them to hold you up and touch your underwear? It's kind of outrageous that it costs them that much to facilitate long security lines. I got to check the price tag on that. I don't know if it ranges differently on flights.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure. But yeah, I have noticed that before. But it's also just like everything. Do you remember there was the thing? Wait, I forget the exact details of this, but this was years ago, like 15 years ago or something like that. But they did like, they published like the results of the TSA's tests. Like they have these third parties go in and just they sneak in like fake explosives, and they missed 80% of them. Like for all that shit that we go through, they still like don't get the stuff.
I don't even know that's possible just with the way that they harass me in my bags. Maybe it's just my dumb face.
It probably is your dumb face. That's the reason for most of my problems is your dumb face. Just being too closely associated with it.
I've traveled with this same shotgun microphone for also 40 flights or something. And I don't remember the airport, but in one airport, they pulled me over for it. And the guy was so excited. He really thought he found a gun. And then when he opened it up and he double checked it, and then he finally pulled it out, and then he had to look at me. It's just a dumb government employee. So all disappointed, like, so what was this thing? It's a microphone, you fucking retard.
Well, it's also, I mean, I'm not trying to be.
He really thought he had something.
Look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but like there are different levels of government employees, and whatever the TSA is, you're just like, you might be better suited to work at Wendy's. I think might be like literally the people who are working at the TSA were applying to Wendy's and the TSA, and they got the TSA job. They're also just, it's one of the things that I just, look, I mean, this is like, the essence of like libertarianism 101 type stuff. But there is something where it's the problem with government in a nutshell, right? Is that it's based on force. So it's not like, you are, every interaction you have with the government is like, there's this threat of force behind it, and we all know that on some level. And so like in any other setting, like if you go to a business, you're the customer. Like I'm not saying there's not some example where someone was like rude to you in a business, but generally speaking, when you go into any type of voluntary market action, the customer is kind of king. People are nice to you. They'll try to help you find something. They're trying to get your business. That's the whole model here, is that we want you to shop with us. Whenever it comes to something like that, it's like, you're essentially the boss when you walk into a store. But when you walk into anything with the government, they're just the boss. They're a monopoly that's based off force. You have no choice. And so it just breeds this thing where, like, you know, if you walk into the Apple store, it's like, hey, I'm a customer here. I need this. And they're like, okay, let me get that for you. But when you walk into the DMV, it's just like, wait on the long line that makes no sense to have you wait on. You know, like everything's just like, and with the TSA, it's like, it's all of that, plus they're the most retarded people you'll ever meet in your life. And no, I did get the other day recognized by a TSA agent who said he's a huge fan. So if you're listening, not you. But also, if you're listening, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about because you work with all these people. But it'll just be things like, literally, like, even they're just dicks. They're fucking, oh my God, dude. I mean, like, I got into a thing with the TSA, which literally almost went bad because like, they're a dick to me all the time, but like, I fly all the time and I'm just trying to keep it moving. But I was flying with my wife and one of them was real snappy to her. And then I started talking shit back to him. And then I could take that to me, but you don't fucking talk to my wife that way. And I said some pretty mean things.
Well, I always like it when sometimes they have the energy like they're about to miss a flight. And it's like, relax. You can process this slower. You don't have to yell at us. We're not checking into prison. It's not that big of a deal. It's not your problem if someone misses a flight. Relax.
Yeah, well, they'll be rude to you when you ask the most reasonable question.
Oh, yeah, because you know what's funny? I'm in every airport, and they all operate differently. So sometimes I literally walk up to the thing. I'm like, hey, is laptop coming out of the bag? And they're like, why would you ask me that? Not going out of the keep it in the bag. Everything goes on there. You're like, relax. I was just asking the question. You're one airport. There's 100 of these across the country. They all have a different policy.
Well, also, I've had that happen when it's the same airport with a different policy.
Yeah.
I've literally had that happen where I'm like, we got to take laptops out, and they're like, no, what do you? And I go, oh, okay, well, we did 2 weeks ago right here, so it's a pretty reasonable thing for me to ask. But yeah, anyway, I'm just literally getting myself angry thinking about that TSA person being rude to my wife. Oh, I was pretty vicious in response to him, though. I said mean things. Anyway, okay, let's get into some stuff that's not just us bitching about flying. By the way, the reason we fly is to come see you good people, and we will be I got a busy month coming up. I guess I'm always kind of busy these days, but we should let everybody know. Well, first of all, I'm doing another big podcast that I think you guys will be excited about in a few days here. So that should be out soon. And then the next one we got together is Appleton, Wisconsin. Very excited to do that. Salt Lake City, Denver, Cleveland, Providence, Tacoma, Spokane, a whole bunch of dates coming up. comicdavesmith.com for those ticket links. And then also, I haven't mentioned it in a while. It's sold out, so you can't come. But I think, I got to check. I don't know if it'll be live streamed or not. But I'm debating at the Soho Forum. That is my next debate. It's going to be an Oxford-style debate on how libertarians ought to feel about immigration. I have been. It's coming up in a few weeks here. It's May 20-something. And it just was like occurring to me today that I was like, I should probably start thinking about that. Should probably put my argument together here. But I am, I've had so much other stuff going on that I've been focused on. But I am excited for this because it's, I've done a lot of debates and different styles of debates, like informal debates where it's just like two people on a podcast arguing an issue. And then I've done the slightly more formal ones where like there's a moderator and then there's two people arguing about an issue. And then I've done a couple of like Oxford style debates, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. But there is something about an Oxford style debate where it's a little bit cleaner. You get to give your opening statement and then give your rebuttal, and then you have a little period to mix it up, and then you give a closing statement, and then people are going to vote on it and vote on before and after, and you see how many people you could change. And it's kind of it has been one of my areas of focus for a while now, has been trying to get libertarians good on this issue. And I don't know, this is a good opportunity for me, I think, because first off, it's at Gene Epstein's Soho Forum, which is like an amazing debate series there, and it's it's kind of it's backed by Reason magazine, and it's become kind of like known in the libertarian world as like the kind of the libertarian debate series. And then I'm debating like Cato's #1 immigration specialist there. So it's a very good opportunity for me to like lay out the case for why libertarians ought to support immigration restrictions. So I'm excited for the opportunity for that. And I believe you're gonna do stand up there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Rob Bernstein will be there.
Some immigration jokes. Got a couple ideas. Hopefully I'll tune them up over Florida weekend.
There you go. And then I think we're doing like I think Gene is organizing some type of after party type thing too. So if you are there, I hope for those of you who have already bought tickets, it'll be that should be a fun time. The Soho Forum for a long time was like my home. I think I'm, as Gene likes to mention, I believe I hold the distinct honor of being the only person who has I've done stand-up opening for the debates many times, and I've also debated and moderated. So I've done everything at that series. And I used to, back when I had less wives and babies, I used to be at every single one of the Soho forums because I just love going there and hanging out. It's like always a great group of people and really interesting debates and all of that. By the way, when I say less wives and babies, I only have the one wife. I haven't gotten any more wives, but I've gotten more babies. But anyway, so it's kind of like a homecoming type thing, and then I get to kind of lay out my case for why open borders are insane and libertarians should oppose them. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And at some point, I'll start thinking about what I'm going to say. It'll be good by the time I get there. Don't you worry. Okay. Anyway, let's jump into this. This was a topic that I found kind of interesting, and for a couple of reasons. It hits on obviously the war in Ukraine, which is something we've spent a lot of time talking about over the years, and it also kind of hit on a major theme that I've been talking and tweeting a lot about. So let's play this clip. This is from yesterday. Donald Trump was taking questions at the White House, and I thought actually one of the better questions that I have heard asked of Donald Trump since he's been back in the White House was asked of him. So let's play that clip.
2.5 years ago, the Nord Stream pipeline blew up.
Yeah.
And despite what people like John Brennan and all the hawks said, you were one person who said Russia probably did not blow up its own pipeline.
Yeah, if you can believe, they said Russia blew it up. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, now that you're president, if you would consider launching a formal investigation into what happened there and who actually did blow it up.
Well, probably if I asked certain people, I'd be able to tell you without having to waste a lot of money on an investigation. But I think a lot of people know who blew it up. But I was the one that blew it up originally because I wouldn't let it be built. And then when Biden got in, he allowed it to be built.
All right. Can you just pause it for a second here?
It's very
Okay. So part of the reason why I found this so fascinating, right, is that first of all, it's a great question. Now, it's one I don't know that I would have thought, huh?
Props to Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge.
Is that who asked the question? Was it a Zero Hedge guy?
We actually know who it was, but Zero Hedge has a guy in the room now who got that.
Oh, right. Yes. Oh, okay. That's funny. I didn't even realize that I know who this is asking a question. So give him credit. Excellent question. I don't know that I would have even thought that. I mean, I could think of some pretty good questions for Trump, but I don't know that I would have thought of that one, but a really good question. And I think in a way it really got to the heart of one of the things that, me and you have talked about, like that's just been, utterly disappointing about this administration. But it's like, oh yeah, that's right. The goddamn government commits so many crimes. I almost forget about really major ones. Like it was just when you asked me to rattle off the crimes, I'm like, okay, well, they lied us into several wars and they instituted totalitarian lockdowns. They covered up a giant pedophile ring. They framed the president for treason. And then you're like, oh yeah, and the biggest act of environmental terrorism in human history. That's right. There's that other one that they did. And then literally this happens 2.5 years ago. The Nord Stream pipeline gets blown up. Joe Biden is on record having threatened to destroy the pipeline. It's clearly got the West's fingerprints all over it. And they tried to tell you that Vladimir Putin blew up his own pipeline, which he built, and he can just turn off. Like, he doesn't have to blow it up. Blowing it up, just all it does is not give him the option to turn it back on. And so this question is asked, and then look, I mean, what do you get from Donald Trump here? He asked the question, are you going to launch an investigation? And Donald Trump goes, well, I wouldn't even need to launch an investigation. I could probably just tell some people and then tell you. A lot of people know. A lot of people know who did it. Translation, no. There won't be an investigation. Donald Trump, like, what is this? A lot of people know. I could just ask them and then tell them. It's, yeah, could you do that? Would you mind? Like, can we do that right now? Can you call? Do you have your cell phone on you? Can you call them right now and ask them how, like, why? It's so funny. The level of, like, you know, like, if you think about all the projection from the corporate media, who is like, if Donald Trump gets in there, he might prosecute his political opponents, and, you know, that while they were doing the same thing to him, and how much was made over him having that lock her up chant back in 2016. But then you sit, like, the reality, it's just unbelievable. It's like, here's the funhouse mirror version, and then the reality is them going like, hey, how about this very specific blatant crime that was committed by the previous administration, who supposedly's guts you hate? You want to tell us about that? And it's like, no interest. And then, of course, he pivots into this nonsense about how he was really the one who blew it up, as if that's a good thing, because he got them to stop, he got Germany and Russia to stop
They should
trading.
have blown it up, but I would have blown it up better. Believe me.
It's also like, you know, it's such a weird, the Nord Stream pipeline's a particularly interesting issue, because it exposes, like, how people think about the world. And, you know, there is what's his name, the Stratford guy, I think his name is Freeman, who he was the head of Stratford for a while, but he basically what he said, which is kind of an interesting theory, is that he was like, the entire motivation for US foreign policy post World War II was to always keep the Germans, it was always like to keep the Russians out and to keep the Germans down. And that essentially, like, the big fear from the American empire is like that Germany and Russia would get together. Like, if they, you know, like, this was like obviously the big fear right before World War II was that, oh my God, what if Stalin and Hitler, you know, like, which is kind of interesting. Like, there's a lot of interesting nuggets about World War II. Like Hitler had a real affinity for the British Empire earlier in his life. Obviously, they ended up going to war, but he had, like, a lot of respect for the British Empire. He had a deal worked out with Stalin at one point, and, like, you have like imperialist Britain, capitalist America, communist Russia, and fascist Germany. And it's not so clear where the partnerships would end up. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like such a given that the capitalists and the communists ought to be friends. And you could make a lot of arguments that fascism is a lot closer to the system of communism than capitalism is. And anyway, so it's just, it's like, you could see where, okay, the team of, you know, Britain, US, and Russia ends up defeating the Nazis and their allies, Italy and Japan and them. But, like, oh my God, if Hitler and Stalin had gotten together, who's to say who wins that? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a given. And basically what Freeman was arguing was that, like, there is the concern from the American empire was, like, if you ever combined the natural resources and the human capital, like the sheer size of Russia and number of people, with, like, German ingenuity, this could pose a real threat to the, you know, like, he would say it in nicer words, like, but this could pose a threat to the rules-based international order, or whatever, you know, to global hegemony, whatever term they use instead of empire, which just means empire with different words. But So it's interesting. Like, I'm not sure this is exactly right, but it's an interesting way to look at things. And that, I know for sure, like, there was if you go read, because there's like notes from the meetings that have been declassified, but there were what's called the 2+4 meetings, and then there were like some subsequent meetings after that, like that where the minutes to the meetings have been declassified. And these are the meetings that were taking place from like 1989, 1990, 1991. So like as the Soviet Union is about to collapse, and during the meetings, like they're not exactly like certain that the Soviet Union is about to collapse, but they're talking about allowing German reunification and pulling back. And there's even talk, I think, of dissolving the Warsaw Pact, and like so there's like all these so while this is happening, and you can read this, like the West is trying to get German reunification. And then a big topic of debate is about NATO expansion. And this is where the not 1 inch to the east promise, where all those promises are made. And one of the things they're talking about is like, okay, so at the time, right, during the height of the Cold War, or I shouldn't say the height, but during the Cold War, I guess this would be not the height, but the end. But so at this time, right, the line was drawn right down the middle of Germany. It was down the Elbe River. So the West Germany is with the West, and East Germany is with the East. And they're talking about, allowing German reunification. The Berlin Wall had just come down like the previous year. And while they're talking about it, kind of like the Russian beef is like, okay, but like, what about NATO now? Because if we reunify Germany, is NATO now moving east? And this is where the original, like, not 1 inch east. And they were saying even let Germany be reunified, but NATO military hardware won't move beyond the Elbe River. Like we'll still draw the line militarily in the same place. Now, ultimately, even by the end, I think the Russians even accepted that, like, that doesn't make any sense. And like, how are you going to reunify Germany, but only the west half of it has NATO protection and not the eastern half of it? And anyway, one of the things that's interesting in that, if you read through the notes of the meeting, is that what they do in a sense to kind of get the Russians to fold and go like, okay, fine, like have Germany under NATO's umbrella, is that they keep like propose, like they float out the idea. They go, or maybe Germany could just be independent. Like maybe we could just have an independent Germany. And then that like sends shivers down everyone. Like the Russians are like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. We don't like that. And so there is this interesting thing where like, we may not think of it that way. World War II seems like kind of ancient history, but to a lot of powerful people, and particularly this is in, 1990. So this is, it's 50 years or 45 years later, but they still, I mean, this war, 60 million people died in World War II. I think it was 30 or 40 million of them died in Eastern Europe in the war between Russia and Germany. And so anyway, my point is that there's a lot of people are freaked out over the prospect of there being this pipeline of like Russia and Germany becoming allies and doing business together and all of this. And the concern, I think, is that could threaten U.S. dominance. And Donald Trump always fell right into that. And that's why he's bragging about, oh, yeah, I was the one who got them to stop being friends. But it's always amazing to me. I remember when I debated at Princeton University, it was the last Oxford-style debate I did. I debated Josh Hammer. And one of the points he was making was like bragging about the Abraham Accords and how successful Donald Trump was for working them out. And I just kind of made the point, I go, it's a little bit weird for you to brag about the Abraham Accords right now. Because like, I don't know if you've paid attention to the Middle East over the last couple of years. It's not going great. And so it's kind now, I'm not saying that like causation isn't correlation or whatever, but like it is a little bit strange. The example I used in the debate was, I said it would be like you're bragging about how you and your wife saw the best couples therapist, Like, this guy is the best. It was unbelievable. Like, the best thing we ever did. And we go, oh, so things are going a lot better for you guys now? And they're like, no, we got divorced. Horrible breakup. But man, that couples counseling was so great. It's like, well, it didn't seem to work out that well. And so it's funny that even in hindsight, Donald Trump can't even like fathom. And maybe it wasn't a good idea. Maybe we would have been way better off if Russia was more integrated with Europe. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, why? It's just crazy. And I think certainly from my perspective, I go, okay, well, look, first off, I don't care about the American empire, because we're not supposed to be an empire anyway. We're supposed to be a republic. And it's been nothing but a disaster for the American people that we've been an empire, not to mention for the countries that we dominate. But I just look at it on a human level and I go, okay, if the worst thing that ever happened in the history of the world was when Germany and Russia went to war, then it seems pretty great that they'd be friends. And of course, America comes in to go, no, let's ruin that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is American Financing. Prices for the last few years have been and continue to be high, and most people, unfortunately, have to reach for credit cards to cover bills. Credit card debt has reached an all-time high, and it's trapping Americans. This is where American Financing comes in. They can help homeowners pay off high-interest debt by using their home's equity. American Financing is a family-owned mortgage lender that's been around for 25 years. Their mortgage consultants are salary-based, so there's no incentive for them to put you in a loan that doesn't make sense. Their customers save an average of $800 a month when they call and let American Financing help them. You may be able to close in as little as 10 days, and you may be able to delay up to 2 mortgage payments, creating more savings up front. Call them today at 866-886-2026. That's 866-886-2026 or americanfinancing.net/Dave. On average, people just like you are saving $800 a month. Plus, they may close your loan in as little as 10 days, and you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, giving you a cushion in uncertain times. Once again, call today, 866-886-2026, 866-886-2026, or visit them online at americanfinancing.net/Dave. All right, let's get back into the show. So anyway, it's just all of it is, I found this question to be interesting. I found Trump's answer to be, terrible and kind of, I don't know, it illustrates something about, first off, how he still gets everything wrong about what led up to the war, and also just the more basic point that I've been harping on for a long time, that me and you have talked about for a while, Rob, that is just like, look, like the crimes that the government has committed are so profound, and you got all these people, Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump himself, who have been making a living calling out these crimes, making their name off calling out these crimes. I mean, Donald Trump had a name, but you know what I'm saying. Even in the question here, Liam points out that it's like, yeah, you're the guy. You're the guy who called it out. Hey, I remember 2.5 years ago when this happened, and I remember you calling out that this was all bullshit, and yet all of you guys are in power now, and there's just no move. There's no move being made. By the way, Rob, I posted this something to this effect earlier on Twitter today, and I was assured by many Trump supporters, you got to give it time, dude. Got to be patient. All these guys are going to be brought to justice. And it's just like, how? I don't know. At what point are you just like, no, they're not. Sorry, I wish they were, but none of that's going to happen.
You're just not a believer, Dave.
That is the problem, I suppose. And, well, and that is true. I am not a believer. I do not believe it at all.
It's a tough pitch for why Russia, in a pre-Ukraine environment, isn't allowed to sell natural gas directly to Germany. Other than that you're representing American oil interests, or you think you got to keep down every single nation so that they can't acquire wealth. It's just a tough pitch, other than mercantilism. That I don't understand how else you kind of justify not letting other countries freely trade with each other.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. And also just that, like on top of that, like Germany had embraced all of these insane climate policies. So I think they got rid of like a whole bunch of their like nuclear power, maybe all of it. I don't remember. I remember reading about this years ago, but it was crazy. And then it's like, oh, here comes Vladimir Putin. Like, I'll sell you some natural gas at a very reasonable price. And we're like, oh, so that you mean that would be like really great for the people of Russia and the people of Germany. And then our role is to come in here and be like, no, stay poorer. Don't get richer. It's just horrible on every level. All right, you want to move on? I kind of almost reluctantly, but I do want to talk a little bit about this Dave Portnoy story, because I just find it fascinating, and the reaction to it is crazy. So if you guys don't know, which I don't know that much about Dave Portnoy, I kind of tend to like him. I don't really know, that much. Like, I don't really watch his content that much. I'm just too I'm too busy for like sports content. I've just got too much work to do, and got little kids and a wife who I try to hang out with every now and then. But I did grow up like a big sports fan, and I still am. I watched the Knicks game the other night. Amazing. We beat the Celtics. But he does like, he's like a sports company, and they do like, it's like dude stuff, I think, like he does like pizza rankings. Like, he'll go to all the best pizza places in the country and rank their pizza, and then they cover like the football games and the shit like that. And that's like, even though I don't like really do that anymore, that's like kind of my type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, when I was 20, I was watching everything on ESPN. If I were 20 today, I'd probably be a huge Barstool sports fan. And ranking pizza seems right up your alley, Rob. It seems like you were a couple zigs when you zagged away from ending up there rather than here. But do you know the Barstool guys at all? Like, do you ever watch any other stuff?
I think he's great. I don't follow everything. I certainly don't agree with all of his political opinions, but just as a radio guy, he's great. When every once in a while I end up on a wormhole of watching his pizza reviews. Every once in a while he pops up on the news. He's funny. He's a great personality. That's not an endorsement of everything he says or does, nor do I watch all of it. But more often than not, when he comes across my feed, I'm like, oh, look, Dave Portnoy, and it's entertaining. Yeah,
that's kind of how I've felt about him too. And then I think, I think there was this dynamic that happened to a lot of people. I'm speaking on my ass a little bit here because I don't really like follow him that closely. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, essentially what happened to him is what happened to a lot of people is over the years of like woke insanity. Like, he was kind of like, oh, I'm not like political. I just want to like be over here and be a dude. And then like the woke people were like, well, that's actually a political statement to be a dude. And so you're our enemy. And then they, they almost like started attacking him about everything. And then he's a dude, so he's not a pussy. You know what I mean? So like, once they started attacking him, it was like, no, fuck you, and started like battling with the woke people.
I love hey, I'm wealthy and it's awesome, and I built this company from scratch, and that's awesome. I love that part of his thing, and he's such a winner. He got some massive payout from that gambling company, and then bought back Barstool for like $1. And now he has full ownership plus all that money that he received on the buyout. Just winner shit.
Yeah. Can't argue with any of that. So anyway. Look, so I'm not coming at this as a guy who like doesn't like Dave Portnoy. You know what I'm saying? Like, that it's just that I do see, I don't know. I think there's like an inability that some people have of how to grapple with like the Jew hating stuff that they don't like. And I understand why they don't like it. I don't like it either. But I think ironically, I suppose, that a lot of the people who really prioritize like shutting down the Jew hatred, like we gotta handle this problem that people are saying mean shit about Jews. They go about it all wrong. And ironically, they end up being the ones who are really feeding that fire. Like, if you think this is a problem, you're making the problem much worse. so I guess what happened was he had some event at like a bar that he owns, doing some sports thing there, and someone showed up with a "fuck the Jews" sign. That's the story. Okay, so here was Dave Portnoy's. I guess pictures were taken and that went up on social media, and it was a bit of a scandal. And then this was his video the next day. I believe he called this an emergency press conference. Let's play.
All right, emergency press conference time.
There you go.
So I'm getting ready to go to the Met Gala, and all of a sudden my phone, the last hour or two, my phone's fucking blowing up. Our bar in Philadelphia, Barstool Sampson Street, usually a great fucking bar. You know, bottle service, people buy drinks. You get a sign. There was a sign yesterday that said, "Fuck the Jews." I've been shaking. I've been so fucking mad for the last 2 hours. Like, I instantly got on. This is why the emergency press conference was late, because I was so over the top. It's like, I'm going to fucking make it my life fucking mission to ruin these people. Like,
Okay, just pause it right here.
I'm never ending.
Okay, so I remember when I was a kid. So when I was a little kid, like I was around, I think I was 5, maybe 6, 5 or 6. And I moved, we moved to this, to a block that was kind of like a tough block. And I wasn't a tough kid at that age. I had never really been, and my parents had already been divorced for years. I didn't really have like a father who was like teaching me how to be a man. I'm noticing that now as I'm doing that with a young boy. You go, oh yeah, that's important. And so we moved to this block. It was like a really tough block. And I used to get like really viciously fucking bullied. And it was like these 12 and 13-year-olds who used to do it. And I was going to this public school, which was a pretty, like, I'm not like trying to paint a picture like I was like had some like horrible childhood or something, but it was tough. It was Brooklyn in the 80s, and there were fist fights, and there were like these 12-year-olds used to fuck us up. And man, when you're 6, a 12-year-old is like a god. I mean, it's just impossible to even imagine that you could stand up to them. And I was at this school. There were a lot of fist fights at school and stuff. And I remember just literally, I had a single mom. I'm not blaming her at all. She just didn't know, you know, this is not really the type of thing a mom can help you with. And I just had to figure it out. And eventually I figured it out and kind of figured it out like, oh, you can't be a pussy. You have to fight. Like that's it. It's like, it sucks, but there's a very basic realization that a lot of men have when they're boys, that it's like, and I just had to figure it out myself, that it was like, oh, getting beat up is not as bad as just getting humiliated. Like, it sucks, but you're also kids. They're not like, it wasn't an environment. I'm not like getting curb stomped here. You know what I mean? I'm going to get like punched in the stomach. It's like, it's not like, anyway, so I kind of figured out how to deal with bullies. So, okay, later in life, this is like much later in life. I think I was in the 5th grade or maybe the 6th grade. And then I went to like a very soft private school. So like I went to public school and then I went to private school. By the way, best, you want to make a future libertarian, send someone to public school and private school. Let them see the difference between the government and the market. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I remember they brought in, this was like at the very beginning of like anti-bullying campaigns, and they brought in this chick, like a school psychologist or something like that, that gave us a talk on how to deal with bullies. And one of the things they said was that you're supposed to start with an I statement and tell them how their actions are making you feel. And you'd be like, I feel disrespected when you speak to me this way. And I remember just sitting there and being like, yo, I figured out many, many years ago that is completely wrong. Like, that is, if somebody is bullying you, the last thing in the world you would ever want to do is let them know that it's working. That's why they're doing it. Like, you can't, that's the fucking incentive for them doing it to begin with. And likewise, in this situation, it's just like, it's crazy to me to like, we're grown adults sitting here and you're like, oh, are you still, so I figured this out at 5. You haven't, to sit here and go, I was literally shaking because I'm so angry about this and this is so wrong. It's like, dude, that's the point. What do you think someone went to a bar in a public event with a "fuck the Jews" sign for? To blend into the crowd? Or do you think maybe they were trying to trigger a reaction out of you? So how counterproductive is it to just give them this reaction? Like, it's, you just, so now this has always been the dynamic, right? And it's like, it's so strange that it's so hard for people to figure this out, right? But since the rise of even like the alt-right and back in like 2016 or any of that shit, it's like, dude, this guy, I mean, I don't know anything about the guy who is holding the sign. I don't know if he's been revealed online or whatever, but this guy is presumably no one, right? He's some dude.
Lady.
Oh, was it? Maybe you're right. I don't know.
But maybe Natalie, you're a lesbian. You're good at tracking down hot chicks.
Natalie, you could just what's coming from inside you right now? What do you feel? Do you know? Can you see her? But you're like, look, presumably whoever this person is, it's like they go there to trigger this reaction. And now look what you hand them. They get to have Dave Portnoy saying he's literally shaking. Like, do you not get the power play here? You know, like, this has always been the thing now that like some 15-year-old on the internet can get an editor at the New York Times or the owner of the Comedy Cellar or whoever to be like freaking out and go, it's like, yes, just recognize this. Take away, it was a couple. Okay. So, but if you recognize this, you can immediately take away the energy source and go like, okay, whatever. You're like, I don't know. What's the appropriate response to this, Rob? I would say if it's my bar and someone comes in and holds up a "fuck the Jews" sign, I'd probably have someone from the bar walk over to them and be like, guys, you got to leave if you have that sign here. You know, can't do that. You want to put the sign away or you want to head out somewhere else, guys? You know, it's like, could be handled like that. Like, that's it. And also like, we gotta stop. And this is, I mean, you can weigh in here, Rob, too, but as me and you have been saying for many years, we've got to stop being snowflakes here, dude. Like, I don't like Jew hatred any more than anybody else does. You know, why would I? It's like against me and my group. It's against my friends and my family. And, you know, okay, I don't like that. But like, what are we? Are we fucking pink-haired 20-year-olds on a college campus somewhere? No, nothing has happened to anybody. No, like, it's like, okay. And I really do. The reason I bring up that childhood story, because I really do think like my childhood, for whatever, like, informs the way I view a lot of this, or maybe it's just the way I'm wired or the way I view things. But it's like, I just think it's such a bad idea to ever turn it to start catastrophizing like very non-big deals. Like, don't do that. It's like, if we didn't learn anything from the rise and fall of wokeism, it's like, don't do that. You don't, like, if you want people to actually be persuaded over to your side, if you want, like, if that's what you're attempting to do, then the last thing you want to do is be hysterical. And it just, I'm sorry, the reaction to this is hysterical. That's all. Any thoughts, Rob?
What? Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I think being not cool doesn't help. It's yeah, what are you gonna make? People shouldn't have signs "fuck the Jews." You can make that statement. Hey, no coming into my bar with the sign "fuck the Jews." You're not invited to do that here.
Yeah, I mean, we're any group of people. It's like, yeah, come on, you can't do that. Like, I don't know, if you hold that up at a bar, you're probably going like, oh, we might get kicked out for doing this, and then they'd be like, listen, you got to put that away, or you got to leave. All right, anyway, let's
a little bit surprising that people feel comfortable enough. Like, I remember once outside of Grand Central, I saw some guy on some anti-Jew tirade, and I was a little surprised by the comfort level, and that I guess Jews are such pussies that they'll be like, oh, you shouldn't have the sign. Whereas, like, with other groups of people, if you pulled that shit, you might just get stomped out on the corner. So there is something a little bit
you're talking Asians?
I don't know about Asians. You could probably get away with Asians, but there's certainly some groups of people that if you decide to make a very public display in the Times Square area about your hatred of this group of people, I think you'd be, I'd be surprised that you felt comfortable doing so, and I'd be surprised. I'd take the over under on how long until that sign at least gets torn up or someone protests it. So there is something a little bit surprising about that. People do have that comfort level to go to public places, with signs like that.
I don't disagree with you on that, and there's no question. I mean, there's been a real rise in the amount of like hostility toward Jewish people on Twitter for sure. And there's accounts with like a lot of followers who are way into that shit. And yeah, okay, so I guess that's a fair point, that like it is bleeding over to some degree where someone now feels comfortable enough to go do this at a Dave Portnoy event. I guess my main point is that like there's no way anyone did this without this being the intended reaction. Like, it's not as if they did this and then thought to themselves, like, I bet Dave Portnoy will love this. You know what I mean? Like, they're doing this knowing they're going to create that, and I think enjoying it. Hey guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Blackout Coffee. As I've told you before, I am a real coffee enthusiast and a bit of a coffee snob, and I love Blackout Coffee. I've been drinking their cold brew for weeks now. It is absolutely delicious. They're a great company filled with people who believe in liberty and free markets, and they do all of their roasting right here in the United States of America. So cut out the big corporations, cut out the middlemen, get your coffee from a company that loves freedom and makes a fantastic product. Go check them out right now at blackoutcoffee.com and make sure to use the promo code PROBLEM when you check out to get 20% off your first order. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/problem and make sure to use the promo code PROBLEM at checkout. That'll get you 20% off your first order. One more time, blackoutcoffee.com/problem, promo code PROBLEM for 20% off your first order. All right, let's get back into the show. Anyway, let's keep playing.
And I just sat, and for the last 2 hours, I have been on the trail. Trust me, I've been on the trail. You think I'm going to put up with this shit at my bar? So I've been hunting down waitresses, the table who did it, and everything you can fucking name, because I want fucking consequences for fucking actions. So I'm not just sitting back like, oh, what are you going to know? Trust me. I have been on it. I believe the two waitresses responsible for the table already fired. I talked to one of them, one of the dumbest fucking humans I've ever talked to in my life. She's at a fucking dance recital. She's like, can I call you back in 20? No fucking honey, you fucking can't. This is your one chance to talk to me. Idiot, total idiot, this girl. I've talked to the guy, Mike Wade, who's tagged. Guess what? He wasn't even fucking there. I had this kid basically in tears turning state witness to me, rolling on the people who were there. I've talked to one of the two guys who fucking did it. He's like, I'm not anti-Semitic. He's basically crying to me. And I'm just like, I don't fucking buy it for a second. Who the fuck would do that sign in my fucking bar? You think I'm just going to sit here? I'm going to make it my fucking mission to put you in lights. My fucking mission. Kid's crying. I just hung up on his ass. I go, I'm giving you 1 fucking hour. 1 fucking hour. 2 kids go to temple. Tell me, how do I make this fucking right before I go fucking ape shit? You want to take anti-Semitism classes? You want to do whatever? You make it feel right. I don't need your fucking tears. The Mike Wade kid wasn't even fucking there. Wasn't in the bar. We got the footage. He's not even fucking bar. Trust me, they're pulling the footage. They're doing this. I'm 20 steps ahead. I'm using everything. I'm like, I am going to come for your fucking throat unless you give me answers. The 2 girls at the bar, idiots. This one girl, one of the waitresses, I just told her, like, you're the dumbest motherfucker I've ever talked to. 25 years old, going on fucking 2, you fucking dumb fuck. What I'm saying is I'm getting
All right, so let's just pause it for a second here. Okay, I mean, that's it. You can cut that video off. That's basically it. But it's like, dude, isn't talking to a 25-year-old girl like that kind of fucked up who works for you? None, right? He's saying this is a waitress at his bar. You're like, I don't know, dude. Like, isn't the spirit of, I would think, like the spirit of why you would be against holding up a fuck the Jews sign is because you'd go like, hey, don't be dicks to people, man. You know what I mean? And I don't know if you really drive that message home, being like, so I cursed out a 25-year-old waitress who works for me. Like, all right. Just seems a little bit of an overreaction.
I half feel like I'm 8 years old being pulled into the principal's office laying on the Jewish guilt trip, but then I have kind of like the boss energy of, this is my fucking bar mafiosa. Listen, honey, what the fuck did you do? Finding the 24-year-old who was in the bar and getting him to cry on the phone. Some of it's kind of fun.
It is kind of funny. I will admit that. I grant you that. But it's also kind of like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know. It just sounds like you're bullying all of these people now. And like, what did the waitress exactly do that was the fuck up? I guess it was on her to say like, oh, you can't have that sign here or something like that. But yeah, she's probably some young dingbat chick who is just like, I don't know. They had a sign. They were tipping well. So like, you know, like, I don't know. Anyway, let's go to the second video because this actually gets funnier to me and just more ridiculous. But let's go to the other video because that's the first video we made. Then there's an update. By the way, I've lost track. I think there's like 7 more update videos, but let's go to the next one because this was particularly funny to me.
Natalie, can you pull up the video of the actual incident? Do you have it?
Oh, yeah. That's probably a good idea. Yeah, let's get... Here, let's.
I mean, you can play this first and see if you can track it down.
Let's do this and then see. So she has some time. Let's see if we could find the video of the incident. But I really think I just saw a still picture, and it's just someone holding up a "fuck the Jews" sign.
All right, real quick update on the "fuck the Jews" sign that was at my bar in Philadelphia yesterday. 2 hours ago, they literally could have cooked an egg on my head. That's how much steam and heat I had come out of my ears. And the more I thought about it, it's like these are young fucking morons who did this. They're drunk. It's like, do you really want to ruin somebody's life? And let me be honest. I don't know what's going on in the world. I do, the Middle East, obviously. But I've been doing Barstool for 20 years. I've had more hate, more anti-Semitism in the last year and a half than I've ever had doing it. And whether people, it's like Kanye, the UFC guy, it's like mainstream lunatics. And I'm not talking about politics or what's going on in the Middle East, just hating groups of people. You hate my parents, you hate my grandparents, shit like that. It's crazy. So, yeah.
Let's pause it already there for a second. It really is, right? Look, man, it's just like you even say it there yourself without really thinking about it. But it's like, yeah, I've never seen it like the way it's been the last year, the last 18 months. Like, yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? And this has been like one of my messages that I've really been trying to get out there for the people who are very concerned about the rise in Jew hatred, is that it's like, yeah, dude, like maybe it is the case that this policy is going to come with this blowback. And that is not the same thing as justifying the blowback or excusing it. I think people are responsible for their actions, and like it's a fucked up thing to do to go bring this sign to a bar. Now, I will also say it's an insane thing to even consider the possibility of, should I ruin a young person's life for this crime? I mean, that is fucking insane. Like the fact that Portnoy even has to go, I was thinking I should ruin their lives, but now I'm going in a different direction, is like, yo, that's a crazy, I don't know. That's also, I think, my mentality, Rob. Like, I'm just old school. Like, I could understand going, I'm going to punch this kid in the mouth for doing this. I cannot understand going, I'm going to ruin this person's life. Like that to me is just too nutty. In the same way, I remember, I don't know, you weren't there for this, Rob. There was a thing a year ago. I almost got I came very close to getting into a fist fight with the guy who was running the open mic after the Legion of Skanks. It was at the old Creek in the Cave in Long Island City. And I really almost fucked this kid up. But like we got very close to getting into a fight, and he was in the wrong. And he was talking shit, and then he just kind of backed down and didn't want to fight. And I was furious. And then I go to the bar, and I was having a drink at the bar. And Rebecca, who is the owner of the club, she used to live above the club. So she comes down because she had heard about this, I guess. And she comes over to me, and she goes, and just to be clear here, I really wanted to fight this kid who was not willing to fight me after he was talking shit. I was white hot angry. This is maybe a half hour later, but I was furious at the kid. And then she comes down And she goes, hey, I heard what happened. Like, what's the problem here? Do you need me to get rid of this guy? And like not that I have the most pull all throughout the world, but at the creek in the cave, I could have said the word and gotten this kid banned from the club. And I remember immediately just going, no, there's no problem, Rebecca. Everything's fine. Because like in my mind, it was always like, look, either we're going to fight or we're not, but I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to like tell on you so that your like livelihood is hurt in some way. That just seems wrong. And so anyway, I think that reaction is crazy. But look, in the same way that I think it's like fairly easy to recognize that like if we're going to have this policy of say bombing Muslim countries, and this involves killing a lot of innocent people, then we are going to deal with a bunch of Muslims who want to kill us. Like that's one of the things that comes along with that policy. That doesn't justify terrorism. That doesn't mean Osama bin Laden was the good guy, but it does mean it's an understandable, predictable consequence of killing a lot of innocent people, is that the people who were close to them are going to be ready to kill you. And in the same sense, you just go, if you see this rise in anti-Semitism over the last year to 18 months, it is quite reasonable to say that maybe this is a result of a policy. Otherwise, why has it been rising? Is it a pure coincidence that it's been rising as we are backing Israel's destruction of Gaza? And then, if you're really concerned about the rise of Jew hatred, maybe think about what's going to happen if we get sucked into a war with Iran on behalf of Israel, and what this country ends up looking like. Or if we are to help the Israelis ethnically cleanse Gaza after this campaign is over, what that's going to do here. Do you think Jew hatred goes up or down as a result of that? And anyway, this is just like I think that, as I've been saying for a long time now, I think that if you want to see less people who hate Jews, which I certainly do, and, it may not be my number one priority. I think there are other outrages that rise above someone holding a sign at a bar. But if you want to see less of that, you can't just be like, you can't give in to the outrage that they are trying to generate. And you got to think about what policies we have that are leading to this. I don't know. To me, that all seems reasonable. I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts, Rob.
I want to see the end of this clip.
All right, here, let's play the end of the clip.
It sounds like a walk back. Started off with "Don't fuck with Portnoy." Message received.
Watch it though.
I'll let it slide.
I'm going to fucking burn these people to the ground, their families, everything. And it's like, you know what? Maybe that's not the best course of action. Maybe I can use this as a teaching moment. And like, before people just are like, fuck the Jews or any group and the hate, let's try to like turn a hideous incident into maybe a learning experience, as cliche and very unlike me. But I talked to both the culprits who I know are super involved in it, talk to the families. I'm sending these kids to Auschwitz. They've agreed to go. That's, of course, the Holocaust concentration camp.
It's too much to bear, Rob. It's too much to bear. First off, can I just say, like,
funny. It started off like Sesame Street. I'm going to teach them a lesson. Then I got to get on a flight and go visit Auschwitz.
First of all, I will say, like, I understand.
That's so brutal.
Clearly, I just want to make it clear for any people out there that Dave Portnoy is talking about the museum that is currently at Auschwitz, but there is something about I'm going to send them to Auschwitz that still rings very Nazi-like to me, to be like, that's the appropriate punishment. I'm going to send them to Auschwitz. It just kind of comes up this. It's not
like, if you just told me I had to go touch the floor of Germany and come back, even that's punishment. But I have to go all the way to Germany and visit the site of horrible humanity. Oh, that's so brutal. And then, Dude, also, you can't even get through it by cracking jokes, which is I personally there was once a school trip that was doing. I was like, I can't go. I'll just be cracking jokes the whole time. This is not for me. I'm not mature enough, nor do I want to process any. And there were one of the rabbis were even why go visit God's devastation. But that's just such a like, that's almost the worst part, is having to go and be respectful the whole time if you're some dickbag kid from Philadelphia who showed up to a bar with the "fuck the Jew" sign, and now you got to go and spend 4 days pretending to be respect. I wonder if Portnoy goes with them also and chaperones it.
Dude, well, so here's the funny thing, right? You could end this video. We don't have to play any more of it. But so this is the funniest thing too, is that, so I don't know where the saga's at now, but the next video after this, like his third emergency press conference, is that they've gone dark on him. Like they just stopped responding after he was like, you have to go to Auschwitz. So they're like, they're just like, go to fucking Auschwitz. What are you talking about, dude?
It's
But
such
look,
a funny thing of wealthy people doling out punishments where it's like your parents would give you a timeout, but a guy who can pay to send you on a ticket will mandate that you go take a tour of Auschwitz.
let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Monetary Metals. I've been telling you about this company for a while. I love these guys. And as you may know, gold prices have been breaking all-time highs in 2024. And now you can get your gold to work for you, generating interest income every month, paid in additional ounces of physical gold. You can earn up to 5% on your gold and silver in their lease offerings, and accredited investors can earn double-digit returns in their bond offerings. Again, all of the interest is paid in ounces, which are stored for free on your behalf. So if you're tired of your gold and silver collecting dust at home, or worse, racking up fees having your metal professionally stored, check out monetary-metals.com to learn how you can start putting your metal to work today. All right, let's get back into the show. But listen, aside from just being hilarious, like, guys, this is all wrong. This is just not the way. First off, don't go into this woke bullshit about how this is a teachable moment and you've got to go, essentially you're saying you got to go take Jewish HR classes or some sensitivity training or something like that. This is not how much do we need to run this experiment? This does not work. It's also just, it's
and
just
what if
stupid.
and what if the kids go over there and they're such anti-Semites to realize, oh, there's actually an efficient system to get rid of them.
You go, my God, I thought the best we could do was hold up signs at bars. But no, we could set up a whole apparatus here.
Yeah, there's hope.
The people who bring a fuck the Jews sign to a bar don't need to be taught that that was insensitive. They're aware. And nobody hasn't heard of the Holocaust. Like it's not an issue of educating people about this. And this is just, I mean, look, all I'm saying is, like, if you want to see this stuff persist and you want to see more of it, this is the way to deal with it. Okay.
I hope he does a daily press conference of 102 days since these people did not report to Auschwitz.
Dude, it is hilarious. Just hilarious that that's the direction he went and said, I'm sending you to Auschwitz. Look, man, like I'll just say, and this is the old, look, I'm not saying like this is the exact perfect model or anything like that. But there was that Daryl Davis guy, and he was this black dude, and he was famous for converting people out of the Ku Klux Klan, and he would he would collect their hoods and like keep their hoods. I forget how many he's got, but he's got like 20 hoods or something like that of like all these guys who used to be in the Klan who he convinced out of it. And the way he would do it is he would have dinner with them, and he wouldn't even talk about the fucking Klan. And he wouldn't even he wouldn't get it. He wasn't angry at them. He wouldn't preach them. They wouldn't talk politics, nothing like that. They just break bread and have some dinner. Like he would just be cool. And then because he was being cool and he was black, eventually they kind of started going like, shit, And then like, I think as he built a rapport with them, he would just kind of let them know like how much that hurt him. You know what I mean? It was like, that's like really hurtful to me that you be a part of this organization, and then let them do all. I'm saying, I'm not saying that's the perfect dynamic. I'm just saying this ain't it. This ain't it. You're not forcing under duress clearly here, right? Like it's not like, hey, I'd really like to educate you about this and I'd like to bring you here to Auschwitz. It's like, hey, I could either ruin your fucking life or you could go here to, that's not the way. That's not how you convert people. It's like step number one, be cool. Step number one is like, be a decent person. Treat people with decency, okay? Step number two, don't catastrophize things. Don't make them a bigger deal than they are. Then you lose all credibility. The thing is, like, you could just go, like, you could just call it what it is. Be like, come on, man. Like, that's not cool to do that. And then you could just have a conversation with people. Like, they're human beings too. What would have been way more interesting to me than any of this would be like, you try, like, interview these guys. And you could even hold them accountable. But again, follow my rules. Follow the Dave Smith rules here. You're not going to be there. How could you? My God. But it's just start a conversation. You don't even have to talk about this. Start talking about sports with them for a little bit and then get into this and then just be like, hey, dude, if you're like a fan of my thing, you come into my bar, this really caused me a whole headache. Also, I'm Jewish. It's kind of like personally insulting to me. I guarantee you have a much better shot at results attacking it that way than you do with this stuff. But this one was more hilarious, so I'll give you that. All right, got to wrap up there. We'll be back with a brand new episode tomorrow. Thank you everybody for listening. Catch you then. Peace. What's up? Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith, and today I am thrilled to welcome back to the show the great Dave DeCamp, who of course is the news editor over at antiwar.com, and he's also the host of Anti-War Radio is the name of the show. Is that right?
Anti-War News is the
Anti-War News. I'm sorry, Anti-War News. So somebody, Dave, as I've said both to you and behind your back, publicly and privately, somebody who has been a tremendous resource for me over the years. If you go to antiwar.com, as I do every day, Dave is always writing something, just about every day it seems, multiple things most days, to just kind of keep you up to pace with the latest of what's going on in foreign wars. And very, fortunately for you, it's been business has been busy. So you have not, if you had the concern that you were going to be put out of business because there just wouldn't be too many foreign wars going on, that problem you don't have to worry about. But anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to join us once again. How are you?
I'm good, Dave. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be speaking with the leader of the woke right.
That's right. It wasn't a job I was applying for, but sometimes they just find you. But yes, of course. Well, you're a valuable member of this woke right. This we have these wild woke views, like, don't go on government mass murder sprees unless you really have to, which is it's basically critical race theory right there. So you had pitched me on the idea, which I very quickly jumped on, but that we should do an episode really kind of, talking about what's been going on in Yemen, in Trump's campaign against the Houthis there. You had made the point just off air before we started here that it really is kind of amazing how little attention this conflict is getting. It's like it feels like only if you live in the United States of America or Israel, perhaps, is it just kind of like a normal thing to go on bombing campaigns. It's not even like big news. You'd think for most countries, that'd be like a really big deal if you started dropping bombs on another country. For us, it seems to be very run of the mill.
Yeah. And what's been happening in Yemen over the past month, for about a month and a half now, has been some of the heaviest bombing that we've seen in the country over the past, 10 years. And this is a country, I really liked your post when Trump started this bombing campaign again, because you said something that I thought was great, that the good news is there is a diplomatic solution, a ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, that's what this is all over. But as we know, the U.S. has been bombing Yemen heavily for a long time, really starting in 2009 with Obama's drone wars. I believe the first U.S. airstrike was launched in Yemen under George W. Bush, but Obama really ramped things up against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And these were, when people talk about Obama's drone wars and the extrajudicial killings and bombing weddings, a lot of it is Yemen. A lot of the most horrific atrocities committed by Obama went down in Yemen. And then in 2015, that was when the Saudis, the UAE, and other Arab countries formed this coalition to go after the Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah. They took over the capital, and the U.S. backed them in this war, even though a few months earlier, as Scott Horton always likes to point out, the U.S. was cooperating with the Houthis against Al-Qaeda. This is a familiar pattern that we see around the region, especially in Syria, where we end up siding with Al-Qaeda. So, you know, the background there is from 2015 to 2022 about the U.S. backed a horrifically brutal war, bombing campaign, ground campaign, blockade, you know, on scale with the barbarity that we've seen in Gaza. And this went on throughout the whole first Trump administration. I know it's an issue you've been very good on and talked about a lot. I remember there was a clip, you went on Joe Rogan, and like the clip they put on YouTube was you talking about this history that I'm talking about now. So I know you're aware of this. Most of your viewers are, like, you know, what we're dealing with here, all this context, but most people just aren't. So then when Trump starts bombing them again and they say, oh, it's to protect shipping lanes, and everybody kind of falls in line. And I mean, I even see libertarians saying, well, we got to protect the shipping lanes. You know, isn't that the purpose of the U.S. Navy? And so, like, the other important historical context here for what's happening now is that after October 7th, after Israel unleashed its brutal bombing campaign on Gaza, the Houthis started targeting Israeli shipping, essentially declaring like a blockade on Israeli shipping in the Red Sea. And in January 2024, President Biden launched a new bombing campaign in Yemen against the Houthis with the UK. And as I predicted at the time, and it wasn't very hard for me to predict, anybody who knew anything about Yemen and the Houthis knew that like a limited bombing campaign isn't going to stop them. If anything, it's going to embolden them and rally their supporters around them. They're trying to make a name for themselves as like the only Arabs really standing up for the Palestinians. And so after a year of that, nothing stopped the attacks. In fact, they expanded their attacks to start targeting American and British shipping. And then after a year, they did stop their attacks. Well, what got them to stop was a ceasefire in Gaza on January 19th. They stopped. And in early March, when Israel imposed a total blockade on Gaza, not letting any food in, which they're still, that's still in effect, complete violation of the ceasefire deal, the Houthis announced that they're going to reimpose their blockade on Israeli shipping. And just a few days later, the Trump administration unleashes this really, heavy bombing campaign, much heavier than what Biden was doing. And again, they're doing this instead of just making Israel implement that ceasefire deal that it signed in January, instead of just, cutting off the aid to Israel. I mean, that's the key here to the regional calm. So, I mean, that's, again, the important context here. So when we see people say, oh, they got to stop attacking U.S. ships. Actually, the Houthis, a senior member of the Ansar Allah political bureau, told Dropsite News that they would be willing to agree to a ceasefire with the U.S. We'll stop attacking your warships if you stop bombing Yemen. I tried to get the State Department, the Pentagon, the National Security Council to answer that. Would you consider a deal like that? And I never heard back. And they do actually usually get back to me. So, I mean, this is just the reality. Hegseth and Trump say if the Houthis stop targeting American ships, we'll stop bombing Yemen. Well, here they are saying we will stop. But they're also saying they're going to continue the blockade on Israel. And that's what this is really about.
Yeah, well, so it's like I really think that the point that I've tried to make about this, like, more recently, when you mentioned, me talking about this on Joe Rogan's podcast a few years ago, I mean, the point I was making at the time was like, we should stop doing this. Like, it was still going on. And I was like, we should stop doing this. This is horrible. I mean, it's just like, horrifically immoral to bring this type of destruction on the poorest country in the Middle East for no strategic reason other than what Obama officials stated, that it was like, oh, this helps our relationship with the Saudis or something like that, which is, insane. But I think today, when we bring it up, it's more important to understand the point that you were making in there, that this is not going to defeat the Houthis. I mean, I'm sure you're kind of like me in this, that when you first saw the Houthis enter this fight, when they made it clear that they were going to stick up for the Palestinians, there is part of you that's like, oh God, no, because Jesus, like, the people of Yemen have just been through so much, and one way or the other, whether it's justified or not, this is going to bring even more, destruction toward Yemen. But the point is that if they made it through the 7 or 8 years of a Saudi invasion, a total blockade, these massive bombing campaigns, they made it through. I mean, it was what was considered by the UN and many other humanitarian organizations to be the worst humanitarian crisis in the world through all of those years. And that didn't unseat the Houthis. Then it's just a joke to think that launching a few tomahawks is going to like get them to wave the white flag. And so you have, on one hand, very clearly there is not a military solution short of another war in Iraq. Like, I think certainly if the U.S. wanted to invade Yemen, we could overthrow the Houthis. As we learned from all these terror wars, we'd probably have other problems to deal with, insurgencies and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, if we want to go spend another $3 trillion and lose another, few thousand U.S. soldiers and maybe have 10 or 20,000 more commit suicide in the aftermath, okay, we could do that. That's one option. The other option would be the ceasefire that, you just can't overstate this, that Trump's envoy negotiated, or at least got done. I guess it was basically the same ceasefire that had been kicked around for quite a bit. But it just seems so obvious, like, not that it's like, oh, look, why, if it was any other country and Trump's envoy, Witkoff here, was able to work out this ceasefire, and then one country started violating it, and it causes more problems for us that they're not living up to, it'd just be so obvious what the answer is here. It's only because it's Israel that this is even, the conversation goes to like, well, then I guess we got to fight this war for them.
Yeah. And I mean, as you mentioned, the Trump administration, they took this as a big victory in the first few weeks that they got this ceasefire. Right. And now Israel has completely abrogated that deal. And we see this daily slaughter happening every day, and they're literally starving children now. I mean, there's no debating that they're not using starvation as a weapon of war now, that they haven't let any food in almost 2 months. And what we've seen in Yemen, so you mentioned during the Saudi war, the Houthis survived that. They didn't just survive it. They actually got better at fighting. And the thing that really made the Saudis and the UAE sue for peace was the fact that Houthi missile and drones started hitting oil fields and oil infrastructure deep inside Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. They hit some targets there as well. And we're seeing a familiar pattern here in the U.S. bombing campaign just in recent weeks. The Houthis have shot down 7 U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drones, which are these big drones. They're used for surveillance that can be used to launch airstrikes. And they've downed a total of 21 of these drones since October 2023, but 7 just in recent weeks. And U.S. officials have been telling the media that they're actually getting better at targeting them. And the U.S. also just lost an F-18 overboard off an aircraft carrier that apparently the aircraft carrier, the Harry Truman, had to make a hard turn to avoid a Houthi attack. So, U.S. warships have incredibly advanced air defense systems, but it almost seems like, it's only a matter of time before a Houthi drone makes it through, and then we might see some American casualties, and then what happens? So it seems like in response to this, these airstrikes not working, they're just ramping them up. The U.S. military, or the Pentagon, put out this press release on the first 100 days of the Trump administration, and somehow they were bragging about bombing Yemen. They said that they struck more than 1,000 targets in Yemen in just again, like a month and a half, a little less than that. And they've killed hundreds of civilians. These have been, some of the most brutal airstrikes we've seen in Yemen. On April 17th, the U.S. bombed a fuel port in Hodeidah, the Red Sea province, and killed, according to the Yemen Data Project, which tracks this stuff, killed 80 civilians. And this is mostly port workers. I mean, this is a massacre on a huge scale. And barely anyone has noticed, in the U.S. at least. Obviously, people in Yemen are very aware. And there's also, just the other day, on Monday, they bombed a migrant detention facility in northern Yemen and killed 68 people. And it looks like they're all African migrants. And the real, what reason, why would the U.S. bomb this facility? I don't think the U.S. would intentionally slaughter a bunch of African migrants. But how bad is their intelligence that they would bomb this? The really kind of egregious thing about it is that the Saudis bombed the same place 3 years ago, in January 2022, right before the ceasefire between the Houthis and the Saudis. As I understand it, it was a different building, but it's like the same facility. And the Saudis killed 91 civilians in that strike, 91 African migrants. 3 years later, the U.S. bombs the same place. And they claim, we're having incredible success. We're killing all these Houthi fighters. And and taking care of their air defenses and everything. But I mean, it's just they have no way of knowing that. They don't really have people on the ground. I saw at one point a statement from the CENTCOM spokesman said something like, "Oh, we've killed hundreds of their militants, based on open source reporting." Well, open source reporting means it's just what you could find on the internet. I mean, it goes to show they just don't know what they're bombing, and their solution is just bomb away. So yeah, it's really criminal what's happening here. It's completely unauthorized. This is an important point here, because you see people justifying it, saying, "Oh, the War Powers Act lets the president, engage in military action for 2 months if there's an imminent, under an emergency, if there's an imminent threat." Well, that Signal chat showed us that there was no imminent threat. They were saying, JD Vance said, "Hey, maybe we should put these plans on the shelf for about a month, work on the messaging." And Pete Hegseth, who was, wanted to do it right away, even said that if, you wanted a pause, we could pause it. And, and he was the one arguing in favor of doing it. So that shows there was no imminent threat. So it's completely illegal. It's immoral. It's failing. And it's only being done to ensure Israel can keep killing Palestinians in Gaza. So this is really just, I think, one of the worst things happening right now under this new Trump administration.
Sorry, I don't mean to smirk as you say that, but there was something in that just seemed like almost what should be the tagline for U.S. foreign policy. It describes all of it. It's illegal, it's immoral, it's not working, and it's only being done for Israel. That seems to kind of describe every military action that I can remember over the last 25 years. And it's wildly frustrating that really, I mean, the only reason anyone's even talking about this on when I say anyone, obviously there are people who care about this, but broadly speaking amongst the American, conversation, is because of this Signalgate thing. And still it seems like the story there, the scandal is just that this Atlantic hack journalist happened to be added to the Signal chat. And I've been saying from the beginning that exactly your point, the real scandal here was that portion of the chat where JD Vance offers the most impotent pushback, but I guess I should give him credit for being the only one who seemed to offer any pushback, where he does say, I think we're making a mistake. I think this is everything against what we ran on, but then goes, I mean, hey, I'm totally on board if you guys want to do it. But then you said Hegseth in response to him goes, I get your point. I get what you're saying. And look, this isn't time sensitive. We don't have to do this right now. And so, in other words, right, the War Powers Act, and I think Rothbard had a piece on this where it was like, look, the War Powers Act was horrible because it basically just gave the president the authority for 2 months or 90 days or whatever it gives you to start a war, and it's like it was already in the Constitution that you need the Congress, so we shouldn't have even added that. But even within the War Powers Act, it's like, yes, the threat has to be imminent. And so, no, you don't. If you have the option to seek congressional approval, you don't have the right to just launch military operations. But it's crazy that never even comes up as a thought. Nobody even thinks to themselves, oh, well, if we don't have to do this right away, then we have to go to Congress and get approval for this. Just not even a thought anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a big risk here when, we talk about the potential for war with Iran. It's not like they're going to have to do this big media thing like they did with Iraq and this build up to get the public on board. They could just bomb Iran. I mean, that's just the way that the executive branch operates now. So yeah, I mean, this is something when it comes to Yemen that I think, we've seen some very mild pushback from some members of the Senate. I know Rand Paul joined a letter questioning the authorization, and there was another letter from 3 Senate Democrats about the civilian casualties, but they didn't even say challenge the fact that the U.S. was bombing Yemen. They were basically just saying you should try to limit civilian casualties. So yeah, I mean, the sad truth is that if they did go to Congress, they would get the approval, but still it is still illegal what they're doing right now in Yemen. And the next possible escalation is backing a ground offensive against the Houthis, which would essentially be restarting the war that the Saudis failed at. There's these factions on the ground saying that they have 80,000 fighters or something, but I don't even think that would be enough, because if you've seen what's happening in Yemen, you know, the Houthi leader has been calling for these rallies. And I mean, these pictures from the capital, like it looks like hundreds of thousands of people come out. And a lot of them have AK-47s. Like this is, again, you know, really emboldening the Houthis and making them this kind of resistance faction that they really want to be. So if we continue down this path of escalation, I mean, it's just going to be just such a disaster. And but again, it just doesn't seem like anybody's learning this lesson in the administration, even though one of the best arguments against bombing Yemen when Biden started doing it was written by Mike Domino, who right now is the head of Middle East policy in the Pentagon. So unfortunately, it looks like, you know, his views are not winning the day, even though right now we still haven't had a strike on Iran. I think that risk is pretty high. And it's just a shame that a guy like Domino doesn't seem to be steering the policy.
Well, or how about a guy like Donald Trump? I mean, Donald Trump said, I'm sure you've seen the clip, but when Tim Pool had him on, he did get this amazing soundbite out of Donald Trump, and it was right after Joe Biden had just bombed Yemen for the same reason. And Donald Trump went off on how stupid this was and how, this is all these guys ever want to do is drop a bomb on someone rather than pick up the phone call and pursue diplomacy and this whole lecture. And man, we could use a guy like that to be president right now, because it just seems like so obvious. But, you know, look, it just seems to me, and I know that sometimes, you know, it's funny because sometimes speaking of Tim Pool, like the Tim Pools of the world will say there's like, you know, there's of the Trump kind of broad coalition, right? There's like the people who are like total Zionists, want to support Israel. There's the people who are, you know, huge critics of Israel. And then there's kind of the people in the middle or whatever. And people like Tim Pool will say like, oh, why are you guys so obsessed with Israel? Like, why are you just always talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? I mean, you know, what are you talking about? What's going on in sub-Saharan Africa right now, or in Southeast Asia, or in where, you know, like, why do you care so much about this conflict? But it's like, you know, aside from it just being like something horrific is being done with my tax dollars, it's really this. It's like, this is really what it's about. It's like, now because we support Israel, we have to now be drawn into yet another war in the Middle East with an even larger war looming behind it, which it seems like there's this huge effort to get us into. And like, this is the whole issue. It's not just like Israel can do this to the Palestinians with American money and that's it. It's like, oh, this also requires us constantly being at war with other Arab states or other Muslim states as a result of it. And this is what we're opposing here. Hey guys, as I always say, if you want to change the world, start with your own behaviors. And here's an easy one. Stop drinking garbage coffee from those giant corporations and switch to Blackout coffee. Blackout coffee is roasted right here in the United States of America by people who believe in liberty just like you. They do all the roasting, packing, and shipping in-house. There's no middleman. There's a reason they have over 25,000 five-star reviews, because the coffee is excellent. I've tried their coffee. I love it, and I'm a bit of a coffee snob, so take my word for it. This is quality coffee. You're going to love it too. So right now, go to blackoutcoffee.com/problem and use the promo code problem, and you're going to get 20% off your order. Again, that's blackoutcoffee.com/problem, promo code problem for 20% off your first order. Support your values, support freedom, and get some coffee that doesn't suck. blackoutcoffee.com/problem, promo code problem for 20% off your first order. All right, let's get back into the show.
Yeah, and when Biden was in 2023, when this all, you know, popped off, the U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria came under like constant like rocket and drone attack because the U.S. was supporting what Israel's doing in Gaza, and it culminated in 3 U.S. Army soldiers being killed in a drone attack. So, you know, this is very much the reason for why the U.S. keeps these bases in Iraq and Syria. I mean, there's been all these reports recently about the Trump administration. You know, they're drawing down troops in Syria. Initial reports said they might pull out, but who was arguing against it? It was Israel. Israel wants the U.S. to stay. Now it's under the pretext of keeping Turkey out of certain areas, you know, after they got rid of Assad, Iran's ally. Now they're saying that the new government, they're justifying invading southern Syria and occupying it and bombing it. So yeah, I mean, this is the key kind of to everything, especially today. Like, again, with Yemen, this is just so obvious. It's more in your face with the situation in Yemen. I remember there was a report from Ynet, Israeli media, because after the U.S. started bombing Yemen on March 15th, and they also preempted Israel completely breaking the ceasefire. It was March 15th that the U.S. first launched the airstrikes on Yemen, and it was March 18th that Israel completely ended the ceasefire and killed like 470 Palestinians in the first 24 hours, including like a lot of kids, like nearly 200 children. And so you look at the timeline, and after that March 18th, when they started bombing Gaza again, then the Houthis started firing missiles at Israel again, kind of separate from them declaring a blockade. Now they're shooting missiles and drones at Israel. And there's a report on Ynet that said the U.S. told Israel, don't worry about these attacks. You guys don't need to respond. We'll take care of it. Because Israel did bomb Yemen, I believe, 2 or 3 times last year in response to these attacks. But so it is just blatantly in your face about this bombing campaign in Yemen is about Israel. Of course, there's other factors, including just the profit, the military industrial complex. Sure. That's always a factor. But this is just so clearly about just ensuring Israel can continue to do whatever it wants. And it's really shameful. I mean, again, I mentioned the blockade. Like, Trump has the ability to get on the phone and say, let the aid into Gaza, or I'm going to cut you off. And every day doesn't do that. I mean, it's just really shameful.
Yeah, and it seems like at least in when we'll see how that develops, but at least like in Ukraine, Trump is certainly willing to say like, hey, look, if you want our support and you're relying on us, then okay, but we have some expectations, we have some boundaries and conditions that come along with that. And yet it almost never seems to be the case with the U.S. relationship with Israel. And to your point, this is something I've kind of been hitting on a lot lately, but I find this to be an interesting dynamic. But like, okay, if like what I know now, what you probably know better than I know, but like if you know about the war in Iraq and you really know, like, okay, you could go read through like the Project for a New American Century, or you can read the Clean Break Memo, or you can read Netanyahu's old writings or whatever. And you could see that like, okay, the Likudniks in Israel and the neoconservatives, their counterpart in the United States of America, they wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein since at least the 90s. Okay. And they were very upset that they didn't overthrow him in the first Gulf War. And they wanted to have plans to overthrow him all throughout the 90s and well before 9/11. However, that was not, first off, there weren't podcasts and there wasn't social media, and there were, there were newsletters and stuff like that, but this was not something that was widely known. It probably was widely known within connected people in DC, but it wasn't widely known by the American people. And the propaganda, at least for going into Iraq, was no, it had nothing to do with that. This has nothing to do with Israel. This was about 9/11. This was about nuclear weapons and the fact that Saddam Hussein was in on 9/11, and now he has nukes, so he's friends with these terrorists. They could end up getting a nuke and nuking the United States of America. So there was at least, there was some good old-fashioned propaganda there where Joe Sixpack in America could very reasonably, seeing what was said on the TV, say to his friend, well, we got to go see about these nuclear weapons. I mean, we can't let that, we can't let that go. But there just simply is no propaganda like this with the Houthis. Nobody is even attempting to make the argument that aside from the fact that they could be a problem for some of our ships, where, as I can't remember, was it JD Vance or Pete Hegseth, or I think both of them acknowledged on the Signal chat, like a very small percentage of our trade even depends on any of this, but like that's the best they got. It's just so obvious that this is about the conflict in Gaza. However you feel about it, that's what's going on here. And you do wonder, like, it seems to me like, I guess, two thoughts. Number one, it just seems like everything else, it seems so short-sighted by even the pro-Israel factions. And then, just because I have, been getting a lot of this heat thrown my way lately, it kind of seems like almost like I've gotten to the point in debating about Israel that nobody anymore is even saying like, oh, you got to go debate this guy or something like that. Like I was getting a lot of Douglas Murray was the one who everyone always used to throw at me. They used to go, you should debate Douglas Murray. He'll destroy you on this. And now they're like, okay. People said Josh Hammer was going to destroy me. Dennis Prager was going to. But now it's no one's even trying to debate that anymore. They're just basically saying that I am responsible for all of the Jew hatred online or something like that. But I just go, for all these people who like Jew hatred on Twitter is their biggest concern. They're like, well, what do you think? What do you think getting into another catastrophic war in the Middle East on behalf of Israel is going to make this country look like? What do you think the response to that is going to be? It almost, to me, seems like a call to their bluff. Like you must not actually be that concerned about this because otherwise this is the last thing you would want to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, people, they don't seem to really want to engage with that point. And this, when it comes to Yemen, because again, it's more in your face. Like it's just, this isn't even part of the discussion. I mean, when do people say, oh, debate me on whether or not we should be bombing Yemen or something like that? And of course, the talking point when it comes to Yemen is that the Houthis are backed by Iran. If you read any mainstream coverage of it, they call them the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. They're the rebels, even though they've controlled Sana'a now for over 10 years. And an important point, because you could look at a map and you'll see the Houthi-controlled areas in the west, and the rest is not controlled by them. But that's where 80% of Yemenis live. That's where most of the population lives. So it's an important point. And Yemen used to be North and South Yemen. It's basically North Yemen that they control, the former country. But anyway, so the narrative is that they're Iran-backed. And they certainly receive support from Iran. What level, we don't really know. Essentially, how I understand it is that Iran probably helped them develop their missile and drone program, giving them these like missile components and drone components. And but they make them domestically. So it's not like they rely on Iran for weapon shipments. And this is something Trump has said, oh, Iran has to cut them off or we're going to, blame them for every attack. And he actually said something recently, like a couple weeks ago, just in a press conference, he said, who knew the Houthis make their own missiles and drones? Could you believe that? It's like, yeah, I knew that. A lot of people knew that before you started bombing them. But anyway, back to your point. So it is the narrative that it's like, this is the axis, the anti-Israel axis. And I do think, Hezbollah is basically neutered at this point. Assad is out of Syria. They do really see the Houthis as a major thorn in Israel's side, because they just keep getting better and better at being able to send missiles and drones, in these long range attacks. So, that's a big part of this, is trying to take out another one of Israel's enemies in the region. And of course, the big one is Iran. And I also think part of this bombing campaign is kind of as a threat to Iran, because Trump's saying he's going to bomb Iran if they don't reach a deal. It's not an idle threat when you see him using 2 aircraft carriers and B-2 bombers stationed in Diego Garcia to bomb Yemen, to, really bomb the crap out of the country. I mean, over 1,000 airstrikes. It's really insane. And yeah, I think the fact that the U.S. is doing this for Israel could increase anti-Semitism more than you saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't help kill babies in Gaza.
Even more than mentioning the name Paul Wolfowitz, you think? You think this could?
That was too much.
Well, yeah, I know. It really was. It was the moment. It was the moment.
And one thing about this anti-Semitism stuff, like I think, obviously if you go on X, you see this stuff, you see these kind of anonymous accounts that Jordan Peterson was talking about on Joe Rogan, I guess. But I think not talking about this stuff and pretending like Israel doesn't have this influence over our foreign policy, like we'll add to that, fuel that fire more. But having people that can honestly discuss these things and aren't anti-Semites, but can discuss, realistically what's happening will lead less people down that path. So that whole talking point is just nonsense. Yeah,
I completely agree. And there's something, there's like I mentioned this a lot on the show because it's I don't know, I think it's important, and it's important particularly to me. But like, so what pulled me into the libertarian world and set me on this trajectory to be whatever I am now was the Ron Paul Giuliani moment, and that Ron Paul was just making this, what I found to be at the time, and then since obsessively reading about this for many years, I've just been more and more convinced is the truth, is that, like, there is a consequence to certain military actions, and that leads to creating a lot of hatred in the world. And that, there's all these different kind of like different people have noted this. Of course, obviously, General McChrystal's insurgent math, 10 minus 2 equals 20. You keep killing people, and there's a lot of innocent people who get killed in the process, and then more and more people join up to the resistance. But it is, even as you're saying that, and of course, as Scott Horton points out and demonstrates in his book, Enough Already, on September 11th, bin Laden and all of his men were like a few hundred people. And then at the height of the global war on terror, it's like tens of thousands of bin Ladenite Islamists who are fighting. Like, it's right in front of you that you're not eliminating them, you're creating more of them. But as you say this, it's maybe even like the first time I'm thinking about it exactly in this way. But imagine you could zoom out, like go back 20 years and you were to say, or 25 years to keep all of them in. But like in terms of like Israel's enemies in the region, because again, this really was, anyone can go read the clean break memo. Like, this was the strategy. Their strategy was like, listen, we're going to have a break from the peace process. We're going to have a break from this idea that we have to settle the Israel-Palestine issue in order for Israel to make peace with the broader Arab and Muslim world. And instead of settling that issue, we can just take out Israel's enemies in the broader Muslim and Arab world. And imagine you were to say to Israel, hey, your big enemies? All right, Saddam Hussein, gone. Muammar Gaddafi, gone. Bashar al-Assad, gone. Hezbollah's leadership, totally annihilated. Like all of that. And they go, shoot, now we got to go see about these Houthis. And you're like, oh, it's just kind of proof. It's like, yeah, you can never whack-a-mole enough to get them all gone. You just can't keep doing this to the Palestinians and think that there's not going to be resistance against that. And it's like, in the same sense that, like, even just within the Israel-Palestine conflict, like, Israel's been dominating and occupying them for 60 years, and they're still dealing with resistance. You can never put it out enough, because people do not much like to be brutally oppressed, and there's going to be resistance to that. It just seems so obvious to me.
Yeah, and when you talk about insurgent math and all that stuff, I mean, this applies, I think, so much with Yemen, with kind of who the Houthis are, like what their identity is. For the background of them, something Douglas Murray said in your debate was, he was like, oh, Iran colonized, these countries. He said that they colonized Yemen. And it's just such an absurd, it's funny for like a British guy to say that in the first place, but for to say that Iran colonized Yemen, I mean, again, it shows he has just no understanding of the situation in Yemen, who the Houthis are. They're a specific sect of Shiite Islam. They're Zaydi Shiites, and the area of North Yemen, like their kind of stronghold, Sadr, and most of the area that they control now, was ruled by Zaydi Shia imams for 1,000 years. Until the 1960s. And the Houthis, they started, I believe they were called the Believing Youth. They started as like a religious movement, kind of as a pushback to the Sunni, Wahhabism that the Saudis were pushing in Yemen. So they started as a religious movement, but they have very, deep roots in the country. And yeah, they're allied with Iran politically because they ended up being on the same side of certain things. But this idea that Iran, because people, again, if you read the media every day and you see Iran's proxy, the Iranian proxy, you would think that Iran like plucked some Shiites out of its own country and dropped them in Yemen, but it's just not true. And again, their whole identity is, part of this resistance against Israel, against U.S. imperialism, against the Gulf monarchs. And you do what the U.S. is doing now, bomb residential buildings full of civilians to kill one guy, and then you think that's not going to, you talk about the insurgent math. I mean, this is just really building up their support. And my hope is that the reality is, because we see this talk about the U.S. backing a ground campaign, but what I'm also hearing is that the other factions in Yemen, some of them have rallied behind the Houthis now in response to them being the ones, really the only ones sticking up for the Palestinians at this point. So it's like, it really just kind of building up their whole like just their whole thing, their whole identity, their whole narrative. And if you're a Yemeni, just a regular guy in Yemen living in these conditions, I mean, you just got to put yourself in their shoes. We see what's happening in Gaza every day. Oh, well, that's why we're being bombed now by the Americans, because we're standing up for all those, you know, those dead children you see on the news every single day. We're the only ones, you know, standing up for that. And that's why the Americans, you know, the evil empire is bombing us. I mean, it's just fertile ground for more recruitment for the Houthis, like to kind of a ridiculous degree.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it is the I know, like, you know, certainly I do know that, right, like Iran was arming Hezbollah for a while. I think this is a major part of the reason why they wanted Bashar al-Assad gone. But it is interesting, first of all, like at any time Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis, any of the H's get written about, it's always Iran backed. And yet this logic never seems to apply. Like it's not like if Jordan ever does anything, they must be referred to as the US-backed Jordanians do this, or the US-backed Egyptians, or the US-backed Saudis, or the US-backed Israelis, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's just, they never like apply this standard across the board. By the way, I mean, again, you know, a point I love to make, but you could also call Hamas the Israeli-backed Hamas militants launched October 7th. You know, like if you were to say it like that, it would, first of all, it would actually be much more accurate and much more damning and eye-opening to the whole situation. But it is an interesting tactic that they use, that you're never, you know, it's funny because if I let's say I were to argue with someone, like maybe on Joe Rogan with someone with a posh British accent, I were to say that, like, hey, you know, the National Endowment for Democracy and the USAID poured $100 million into the Maidan Revolution. Well, that now I'm denying agency. You know, like you're denying agency if you bring that up, and yet referring to every militant group in the region as an Iranian proxy is somehow not denying agency. And so, like you're like not even saying that Iran hasn't been political allies with some of these people, but they are their own groups with their own motivations as well.
Yeah, and as I understand, you know, Iran has a lot of sway over Hezbollah. You know, they're very closely aligned with them over the Shiite factions in Iraq that the U.S. helped put in power. But when it comes to Yemen, I mean, the Houthis are like known as being much more their own thing. So yeah, it's just, and I've seen people say the opposite, but it's just not true. Like, so, but whenever we see, you know, what little mainstream coverage there is of the situation, it's like, oh, U.S. airstrike in Yemen killed 65 migrants. The Iran-backed Houthis say, like, they just kind of acting like everything's not really a big deal. What's happened? It's like, oh, it's just the Iran-backed Houthis that were bombing. You know, don't worry about all these civilians. So yeah, it's just, and you talk about the consequences of blowback and everything for what's happening now. It just, it's just, there's such a better way to approach the whole region at this point. And I don't even think like Trump wouldn't be like, I think if Trump really wanted to bring peace, he has the ability. I mean, again, it's all, Gaza's the key, but it just doesn't seem like he wants to do that.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. Let me ask you something. If the grocery store shelves went empty tomorrow, would your family be ready? Personally, I trust My Patriot Supply with my family's food security, and here's why. They've helped millions of Americans prepare for the worst, and they have over 70,000 five-star reviews. Personally, I keep their 3-month emergency food kits on hand, and right now, you can get the same ones I use for $200 off. That's a huge discount, and believe me, My Patriot Supply almost never offers deals like this. The food kits give you 2,000 calories a day per person for 3 months. The food tastes great, lasts up to 25 years. It ships free with delivery in as little as 2 days. So take advantage of this deal and go to preparewithsmith.com. This $200 off discount is only for a limited time, so don't wait. Go to preparewithsmith.com right now. That's preparewithsmith.com. Get peace of mind while it's still available. All right, let's get back into the show. What do you make of Donald Trump, who appears to have at least temporarily thwarted the Israeli plans to launch attacks on Israel, excuse me, on Iran. And now over the last couple of weeks, Netanyahu's been saying they're about to do it anyway. But it does seem like the plans that they had laid out involved the U.S. helping them, because of course they can't actually do any of this stuff without our help. Do you think, I mean, like, this seems to me like a small temporary win, at least, given a bad situation, but do you think he's like you said, I mean, he could be pushing for peace in this region, and he doesn't seem to be using any of the leverage he has, which is substantial. What do you make of that? Where do you see this all going?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that he's even just saying, like, oh, if we don't reach a deal, we're going to bomb them, is not, that's not good. You don't need to approach these negotiations like that. And I mean, when he was asked about this report recently, and somebody said, it was in his Time interview, they said, oh, do you think Netanyahu's going to drag you into war? And he said, I'd go willingly. Basically, he said, I could go into it willingly. And that if we do attack, Iran will be leading the pack. So he's, really making these threats. And a lot of people kind of point to his first term and like the threats against North Korea. But again, we're talking about a situation where in the same region, the U.S. has all this firepower that's bombing another country. And a big part of the buildup, sending the bombers, sending the aircraft carriers, and also sending air defenses to Israel to prepare for this potential war with Iran. Like, the U.S. has the military posture to do it. So, I mean, the fact that he chose not to bomb Iran, I mean, it's hard for me to give him credit for that, because like, it shouldn't even be a possibility in the first place. But it's just concerning. It does seem like he wants a deal. He does keep saying that, and while he makes these threats. And it looks like the negotiations are advancing. I mean, they've had 3 rounds, and both sides say they're going well. On the other hand, you have the Trump administration officials like Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz saying publicly that any deal must dismantle Iran's nuclear enrichment program altogether, which that's just a non-starter for Iran. But it looks like that's not the demand that they're making behind the scenes. So, I mean, it's tough to say where this is going to go. There was recently, over the weekend, a huge port explosion in Iran that I believe killed 60 people. And with things like that, I mean, the Iranians haven't made the accusation that it was an attack or sabotage, but Israel has a history of sabotage attacks inside Iran and of doing them to sabotage diplomacy between the U.S. and Iran. They did it. They detonated an explosive in an Iranian nuclear facility in April 2021 when Biden started negotiations with Iran. But again, so far, no Israeli sources have taken credit for that, or in the Iranians. There's like an Iranian member of parliament who accused the Israelis of being behind it. But the fact is, we don't really know at this point. But something like that, like a sabotage attack, we might see things like that Netanyahu might do to try to sabotage the diplomacy, because I think he sees this as the time. This Trump administration is his chance, possibly his last chance, to get that war with Iran that he's always wanted. And then, imagine if the U.S. and Iran are engaged in a war. He could just do whatever he wants to the Palestinians in Gaza. There's not going to be nearly as much attention on it. They could advance their designs in the West Bank more freely. So, yeah, it's, he has a lot of motive to make this war happen, Netanyahu.
Do you think the way I've always felt about this, as I've been paying attention to it over the last, couple decades, is that it seems to me that the Iranians, much like, I think this is kind of the way it always works with governments in general, but like governments they kind of have to at least pose as your protectors in order to preserve any perceived legitimacy amongst their people. And so the Iranians, like, for example, when they responded to the Israeli attacks back last year, and they sent those rockets, or they sent those missiles at Israel, but they gave the U.S. warning, and they didn't really send everything they had. They essentially, it seems like, similarly to after Donald Trump killed Soleimani, and they kind of sent like some rockets at U.S. bases, but didn't kill anybody. Like, they want to, they basically want to act as if they've responded to kind of save face with their own people. But then at the same time, they don't really want this fight, because they know, I mean, if you could picture where Iran is, like if you could picture a map of them, like their neighbors are Iraq and Afghanistan. They've seen what the U.S. military has done to their two neighbors while threatening to do it to them for these entire 20 years. And it does almost seem like they don't actually want this fight. They want to, posture as if they're not pushovers and that they will respond. I think what a lot of the, it's like I almost think about, like an analogy, it would be that, like, it's imagine you're like walking with your wife and your two kids down the street or something like that. I think we both got the same amount of kids. You were walking with your two kids and your wife, and you're surrounded by much tougher guys, and they're like talking shit and they're disrespecting you, and you're almost like, all right, okay, just take it, let's keep walking. Like, I don't want anything to happen to my family here. But like at a certain point, if they cross a line, you're gonna be like, well, I guess I got to fight these guys and land as many punches as I can. I'm probably going to lose, but I have to do something here. And it does seem like the Trump administration and the war hawks are presenting this as if it is an option to just take out the Iranian nuclear sites, like to just have a massive bombing campaign in Iran, and then that's it. We don't have to do like a full invasion like we did in Iraq. We could just do that and then go back to life as normal. My guess would be there is no way that Iran could allow that to happen without some type of response, and they have a lot of responses available to them. But what do you think about that? Like, is it possible for the Israelis and the American military to just take out the Iranian nuclear program and that's that?
I do not think so, but that is the talking point we hear. Like, I remember Tom Cotton said that recently in a hearing, and you see people who support this idea of bombing Iran, acting like it'll be no big deal. But I think it's very clear, if they take that step, because, what it would take to try to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities would be dropping the U.S.'s heaviest bunker busting bombs. They're like 30,000 pounds, because they built these facilities deep underground because in anticipation of something like this happening. So if the U.S. goes out and drops those bombs on that, they're going to respond. And the fact is that they have advanced ballistic missiles that can hit, I believe, about 10 U.S. bases in the region, probably more. And as this is something Tucker's been talking about a lot lately. The Pentagon assessments are like hundreds or thousands of American casualties. And then what happens? Is Trump just going to be like, oh, well, that's that? No, then it's going to become an even bigger war. I don't really see a situation where the U.S. tries to invade Iran. It's just not realistic. Like, nobody has the will. None of the people in the U.S. have the will. The U.S. military doesn't have the will. Where are they going to invade from? But I could see just really heavy bombing, maybe some ground fighting in Iraq or something, until somebody says, all right, enough. I guess we just got to negotiate here or something. But it's just, there's no way that the U.S. just takes out the nuclear facilities and that's it. The other thing is that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. That's what U.S. intelligence has said. That's been the consensus since the early 2000s. But they use their nuclear program essentially as leverage, and they kind of use the threat of it turning into weaponization as leverage. And the conversation has changed inside Iran. You're seeing more calls for the Ayatollah to reverse his ban on making nukes. And an advisor to the Ayatollah said that if the U.S. and Israel attack, then we could change our position on nuclear weapons. They want there to be consequences for bombing them. And that New York Times report was interesting. It said that the plans to attack Iran could set back their nuclear program by a year. So suggesting that, they actually can't completely destroy it, which makes sense. So it would be like bombing a country under a phony pretext of them having a nuclear weapons program, and it could actually create one. So the whole thing, for every reason, it's just would be a very foolish thing to do. And there's just no reason to be this hostile against Iran right now, except for Israel.
Yeah, no, that's right. And, it reminds me even, right, like Douglas Murray said to me when I pointed out that the war in Afghanistan was not just about taking out al-Qaeda, but that we launched a 20-year regime change war against the Taliban. And he goes, well, you got dragged into the quicksand of war. And it's like, right. Yeah, that's right. That sure can happen. Not like if you if you look at the original, authorization of use of military force against Iraq, it was very narrow to take out Saddam Hussein. And we took out Saddam Hussein very quickly, but then we were there for another 2 decades, and I guess still have some military forces there today. Even at the beginning of the Ukraine war, Joe Biden was very clear that the Ukraine can win with sanctions, that we could support them just with sanctions. That was supposed to be the extent of American involvement. And you just see this all over the place. So the idea that, right, like we're going to just bomb the crap out of Iran, but that'll be it. Man, you want to talk about risky games, that is a risky one. And as you said, it just seems like it would be a situation where they would have to really respond. And if they really responded, then how the hell are we not going to really respond to that? I mean, again, just try to even imagine, there was, after Trump killed Soleimani, there was some restraint showed on both sides of that. And look, you could say killing Soleimani was probably one of the worst things Donald Trump ever did, just in terms of how risky a move it was. But then you could also say that one of the best things he ever did was just leave it at that and not, respond any further. But if you could just like run a counterfactual in your head and imagine that like the Iranian retaliatory strike had killed 10 US servicemen. Is it possible that Donald Trump would have? I certainly don't think so. I don't think there's any world in which Mr. Tough Guy Donald Trump, with all of his Miriam Adelson money and all of the neocon hawks that he has around him, it would possibly be able to say, you're going to just let them kill 10 US soldiers and not have a bigger response to that. And so this is, the quicksand of war, as even neocon Douglas Murray would call it. You just see it right in front of you. And again, for what benefit are we even playing with this game? So that the country of Iran, that poses no threat to any of us, might continue to pose no threat to any of us. It's just it's madness.
Yeah, and fortunately, it seems like the lesson Trump got out of the Soleimani thing was that he could hit Iran hard and not really suffer any consequences. That seems to be. And you see this kind of talking point from him and like his supporters, like, oh, Iran didn't do anything after that, after we killed Soleimani. Well, they killed Soleimani under the pretext that he was helping plot attacks on U.S. bases in the region. A U.S. soldier was killed a few weeks earlier in Kirkuk, Iraq, and we don't really know who launched that rocket. And then in March of that year, more American, I believe one or two, or maybe some British soldiers, I forget exactly the number, but at least one American was killed. Like just a couple months later. So the whole talking point is, oh, Iran didn't, nothing happened after we killed Soleimani. It kind of solved all the problems, but it's just not the case. So, but that is, you hear Trump whenever, how he always says, oh, this would have never happened if it was me. Iran was broke. He touts his first, administration's Iran policy, even though it was a complete failure, as like this great thing that like brought peace, which is just not the case. So unfortunately, it seems like that's his thinking.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Sheath Underwear. Of course, you know and love them by now. Sheath uses moisture wicking technology to create underwear that keeps everything breathable and incredibly comfortable for you downstairs. Sheath Smart Underwear comes in a number of different styles, including a brief with a dual pouch, which is highly recommended. I was a little skeptical about the dual pouch at first, but can't live without it now. I've been wearing Sheath underwear exclusively. They're the only underwear that I wear, the only underwear that I have been wearing for years. So go support a longtime sponsor of this show and get yourself the most comfortable pair of boxer briefs you will ever own while you do it. Check them out, sheathunderwear.com. Promo code PROBLEM for 20% off your order. They ship anywhere in the world. Sheathunderwear.com. Promo code PROBLEM for 20% off. All right, let's get back into the show. So do you, if you had to, you cover this stuff, for a living and in much more detail than I do. What, if you had to guess, where do you think happens from here?
Man, it's tough. I think one big risk here, when we talk about American casualties is the Houthis. They're full of surprises. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one of their drones or missiles hit a U.S. warship. Or maybe they'll try to target a base across the Red Sea in Djibouti or something. or who knows? I mean, you just never know what they might be able to hit. There's a risk there, and then of the U.S. really escalating in Yemen and trying to back a ground invasion. But what, obviously the big thing is Iran. And a few weeks ago, I was much more pessimistic. I thought it was like inevitable. When he started bombing Yemen and was making all these threats, and Israel's just unleashing in Gaza again, it's just like, oh wow, we're actually just going to go into war with Iran, aren't we? But since the negotiations started, and the fact that they seem to be, there's progress happening. They've even had some direct engagement. And it looks like, obviously, Iran doesn't want a war with the U.S., and I think they're making that very clear to Trump. So that I think the risk is a little lower, but it's so hard for me to imagine them signing a deal with Iran. It's like that was like the JCPOA that Obama negotiated, because like every Republican is going to be against it. Even it's just hard for me to imagine like an Iran nuclear deal happening right now. And that is the thing. It seems like is the only thing that'll prevent war. So I think the chances are still pretty high of this turning into the U.S. and Iran launching some strikes. Sorry, the U.S. and Israel launching strikes on Iran. I think there's a good chance of that still happening here, and then who knows where things escalate from there. But it's just, I just don't see. I follow the stuff in Gaza every day, the negotiations. It's like you saw Trump the other day saying, claiming that he told Netanyahu he's got to be good to the people in Gaza, and we're taking care of the aid situation, but there's no aid, there's no food going in there, and they're just killing dozens of people every day. So it just doesn't seem like he's willing to put any pressure on Israel to stop that right now, even though the Israeli hostage with American citizenship has apparently, according to Hamas, has gone missing after an Israeli airstrike. I mean, you think that would be enough if that was his priority to get him to stop this, but it just goes on. It just goes on, and everybody's focused kind of more on the domestic stuff here in the U.S. I mean, for good reason. There's a lot of stuff happening, but it's just, one thing really kind of showed how the media views all this stuff. After the Signalgate thing, Trump was in the Oval Office talking to reporters, and they were like grilling him about them having this conversation in Signal, and including the Atlantic reporter. And he was trying to deflect, and the way he was trying to do it, he's like, I don't get why nobody asked me about the airstrikes against the Houthis. They're going great. We're launching all these. We're bombing them. And like nobody's saying, well, actually, they're not going great. Like nobody challenged him on that. They just kept asking about the thing. So it's like, and this is the issue. I mean, even with all this going on with Iran, it's like a lot of Americans don't really follow it. And that if this does lead to the U.S. and Israel bombing Iran hitting back with missiles, killing Americans, then that's it. We're at war with Iran, and however that will play out. So there's just a real risk of this unless something really changes. Yeah.
And man, it probably can't be overstated how as disastrous as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria and Somalia and Yemen, as bad as they were, Iran is biting off a lot more than any of those. I mean, by far. And they're much more formidable. And that's not to say that they're a more powerful military than the United States of America, but like neither was the Taliban. And they outlasted us in that war. So yeah, it's dangerous times. I tend to agree with your assessment. I would love to think that these negotiations could lead to a deal, but just looking at the people just around Donald Trump, I mean, it just seems like every one of them is going to oppose this. And so we will see. But I do appreciate, as always, Dave DeCamp, you coming and helping us understand this stuff better. Please let people know where they can find your work or anything else you want to promote. And let them know.
Yeah, all my writing is at antiwar.com. If you look at the news section at the top, there's usually a few articles by me there. And I have a show called Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp, where I basically go over the daily news stories 5 days a week. It's on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you could go subscribe to that. Also on Rumble, Odyssey, and most people listen to the audio, the podcast. It's great to kind of just throw on. It's like 30 minutes a day to get updated on the foreign policy stuff. It's kind of for foreign policy nerds, and it can get pretty depressing to listen to it every day, but people seem to like it. So, but yeah, that's it. And follow me on X at DeCamp Dave is my handle over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I can't recommend Dave's work highly enough. If you do want to stay informed on what's going on, and yes, it is depressing, but you know, it's always better to know the truth than to bury your head in the sand. So anyway, thank you again, brother, for as always, and I look forward to talking to you soon. And thank you to everybody for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.